Giza, 1935. An archaeologist pulls a limestone tablet from a demolished chapel near the Great Pyramid. 10 columns of hieroglyphs, of a funeral order, for a dog. It reads, "The dog which was the guard of His Majesty. Aboutu is his name. His Majesty ordered that he be buried ceremonially, that he be given a coffin from the royal treasury, fine linen in great quantity, and incense. The materials of a noble's burial, ordered by a king for his dog." That tablet sits in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo today, and it's some of the oldest evidence we have of a human being grieving for a dog by name. This is the story of that bond: pets, hunters, guards, workers, gods, and what tombs, collars, and mummies can tell us about it. Long before Egypt had pyramids, it had dogs. Pre-dynastic rock art going back over 5,000 years shows slender, prick-eared animals running alongside hunters. And by the Old Kingdom, dogs are everywhere in Egyptian art. Carved into tomb walls, painted onto chapel reliefs, modeled in ivory. The clearest evidence comes from tomb decoration. Nobles commissioned scenes of daily life for their burial chapels, believing the images could sustain those activities in the afterlife. Dogs appear constantly, flushing game in the marshes, running down antelope, sitting beneath their owner's chair. We're not guessing what Egyptian dogs look like from a poem. We're looking at what Egyptian artists actually put in front of them. The most recognizable type is what Egyptologists call the Tesem: lean, long-legged, prick-eared, with a tightly curled tail, built like a sighthound. It appears constantly from the earliest pre-dynastic art through to the New Kingdom, more than 2,000 years later. Here's where it's worth being careful. It's tempting to see a slender, curl-tailed dog on a tomb wall and say, that's obviously a Basenji or a pharaoh hound. Modern breed clubs have leaned into that story for decades, but Egyptologists and geneticists are far more cautious. The Tesem wasn't a breed in the closed pedigree sense. It was a type, a body shape that recurs because it worked for hunting, not because Egyptians ran a formal breeding program. Genetic studies have found no direct, unbroken lineage connecting modern sighthound breeds to these ancient dogs. Convergent evolution, different populations landing on the same efficient shape for the same job, is at least as likely. So treat any claim that a modern breed is literally what the pharaohs kept as marketing dressed up as history. The art also shows other builds entirely. Heavier, mastiff-like guard dogs with drooping ears and shorter-legged animals resembling modern basset types. Egypt didn't have one national dog. It had a working population shaped by function. Picture a hunting party setting out from a Nile-side estate before dawn, heading for the marshes or the desert fringe where gazelle and hare could be found. This is a reconstruction. No diary describes this specific morning. But it's built directly from what tomb art shows again and again. Hunters with bows and throw sticks, dogs coursing ahead of them, running down desert game across open ground. The Tesem-type dog, fast and built for stamina, is shown doing exactly this, from Old Kingdom tombs through to New Kingdom royalty. Dogs also guarded property and worked alongside herders and travelers. Aboutu himself is explicitly described as the guard of His Majesty. But hunting and guarding don't fully capture the relationship. The tomb art keeps returning to something gentler. A dog curled beneath its owner's chair, a dog on a loose leash, simply present in a scene of daily life, not working, just there. Egyptians only put things into their tombs that mattered enough to carry into eternity. Maybe the most human detail here is that Egyptians named their dogs and wrote those names down. More than 70 ancient Egyptian dog names survive on collars, stelae, and tomb reliefs. Some describing temperament like Brave One or Reliable. Some describing color like Blackie. Some blunt like a dog simply named Useless. Others named for natural phenomena like North Wind, or given a number instead of a word like the Fifth. That range matters. Dogs weren't an anonymous category of livestock to the people who owned them. They were individuals, distinct enough to deserve a specific word, and remembered specifically enough that someone carved that word into stone. Because Egyptians believed physical remains mattered for the afterlife, dogs that were valued enough got the same basic treatment humans did: preservation and a proper burial. Some pet dogs were interred close to or even within their owner's tomb, following their people into the next world as they had through this one. The evidence here is patchier than we'd like. Well-documented individual pet burials are the exception, not something we can describe in detail for the average household. What's well established is the underlying idea. A cherished animal deserved continuity beyond death, and mummification was one way Egyptians tried to provide it. That idea scaled up into something almost unimaginable. At Saqqara, near ancient Memphis, lie catacombs dedicated to Anubis. A survey led by Egyptologist Salima Ikram and archaeologist Paul Nicholson, starting in 2009, found an estimated 8 million mummified animals packed into the tunnels, the overwhelming majority of them dogs, including a large number of puppies, some just hours old at death. This wasn't pet burial, it was an industry. Pilgrims visiting the Temple of Anubis could buy a mummified dog as a votive offering, a physical prayer carried to the god through the animal sacred to him. To meet that demand, breeders around Memphis appear to have raised dogs specifically to be mummified as offerings, on a scale unmatched anywhere else in the ancient world. Reverence and industrial-scale breeding, side by side, wrapped in the same religious logic. This connects to Anubis, and it's worth being precise about what he actually is. Anubis is usually described as a jackal-headed or canine deity associated with embalming, cemeteries, and the passage into the afterlife, not, as it's sometimes loosely put, the Egyptian god of dogs. Egyptians almost certainly modeled his form on the wild canids they saw scavenging around cemeteries on the desert edge. Animals whose presence near the dead made them feel like natural guardians of that threshold. Here's a twist even many Egyptology enthusiasts haven't caught up with. The animal in question was long labeled a subspecies of golden jackal. But genetic studies published since 2011, including a major genome study in 2015, found this Egyptian jackal isn't a jackal at all. It's genetically a wolf, part of the grey wolf lineage. Distinct enough that researchers now call it the African golden wolf. Anubis may never have been modeled on a jackal in the first place. The animal watching over Egypt's dead for thousands of years was biologically a wolf the whole time. We can't reconstruct the death of an ordinary household dog with certainty. No surviving diary describes this too deeply. However, Aboutu's stela shows a king treating his dog's death as worth a formal, state-sanctioned response. The tomb art that keeps placing dogs beside their owners shows people who wanted that companionship carried into eternity. And Herodotus, writing later as a Greek visitor, recorded that Egyptian households mourned when a pet dog died, a second-hand account from an outsider, so one data point rather than proof on its own. Together, it's not a stretch to say a beloved dog's death was treated as real. Not identical to the death of a person, but not nothing either. Strip away the guesswork and the marketing, and what's left is still remarkable. A king who ordered a coffin and incense for his dog. 70+ names carved into collars and stone because owners wanted their dogs remembered as individuals. Millions of mummified animals outside Memphis. Evidence of a religious economy built around the bond between people and dogs. And a god at the doorway between life and death. Quietly modeled on an animal Egyptians simply got wrong. None of that required modern sentimentality to happen. It happened in Bronze Age Egypt, carved into stone by people who had no reason to perform affection for a camera. The bond between humans and dogs isn't a recent invention. The evidence suggests it's about as old as civilization itself, and it was already deep enough, 4,000 years ago, to be worth carrying into the afterlife.